Everybody, good morning. We're going to do it a little different today and start on the whiteboard. Let's talk about time. To understand destiny, we have to understand time. So we're going to go x-axis here. Let's start with a little math, a little Sunday math. Here's you as a baby. I'm not going to do a good job of making a baby, but you've got like baby roll arms, right? Kind of a big baby. A little passy. Okay, so this is when you're a baby, when you're born, right? We experience time unfold chronologically, right? I'm 1, I'm 2, I'm 3, and so on. And then you wake up one day and you're 40. And you wonder what happened. So when we experience time unfold chronologically, that's because we're bound by the third dimension. The spirit realm is essentially layered above us, although it's not technically just above, it's slightly outside of, right? So this is where we're constrained by the visible light spectrum. So everything in here is physical, right? So then we go 4D, 5D, 6D, 7D, right? We've had a lot of conversations about this at Chainbreaker, that when you look at the intersection between kind of quantum understanding, string theory, biblical knowledge, and paradigms, essentially you have the courts of heaven, 7th dimension and above, right? So essentially the throne of God, as you overlay it with string theory, is essentially 7D. So we're here experiencing time unfold chronologically, but there's a constant interaction between the spiritual realm and the physical realm. So we are experiencing information that's coming from 5D. It's coming back and influencing our walk here. We're then meeting somebody here that triggers something else in the spirit. Maybe that triggers something in the 4D. So there's always an interplay of information going back and forth between other higher dimensions and where we're physically experiencing our reality. Destiny is a fixed point that God has designed and ordained for us before we even came here. So one question I just want you to think about, is it possible for you to ruin your destiny? No. You can delay it. So, good catch. You can delay it. You can make it really hard for God to get you where you need to go. But ultimately, your destiny is your destiny. You're going where you're going. God already designed it for you. Nothing can change that. So, what I want us to establish today is that there is a perfect will and there's a permissible will. God ultimately lets us have free will. When we have free will, we're able to make selections from the current posture of our heart. So we can listen to God and be obedient to God, or we can delay ourselves and take a long roundabout on the way to our destiny. So let's say this red line is a permissible will, right? And then let's say that this now orange line that I'm going to draw in here, maybe we go a little bit out of our way, but mostly we're tracking alongside this blue line. Let's say God's perfect will for our lives is that maybe we take a couple little meandering blips here and there, but God's mostly taking us in the most direct, fast path toward a destiny possible. Some of you have gone the red path, and if we're really honest with ourselves, I'm going to go in a poop brown color here. Some of you like to go like this. Let me go all the way back to the beginning again. We're going to go here. Oh, I'm going to loop around. Let me go back to the beginning again. That sounds fun, right? So the brown line is how some of you are trying to walk with God or trying to turn your back on God in the process. Maybe God's trying to meet you multiple times, and then every once in a while you turn your back and you go back to the beginning. Imagine a board game like Chutes and Ladders, where you're really crushing it and you're at the end and all of a sudden you hit that one chute that takes you back to the beginning. We are able to do this essentially in our walk with God, and he allows it because it's an important lesson for us. So we have multiple options here. You can listen to God and you can literally go on the straight and narrow, right, which is his perfect will for your life, which Doesn't mean that doesn't have bumps. Of course, it's still going to have bumps, right? God forms and builds our character through some of those bumps and adversity. But you've got his perfect will, you've got his permissible will, and then he's got the things that he just allows you to do that are not at all his permissible will. He just loves you, so he keeps rescuing you. Some of you are living in that phase of your life right now. But ultimately, our destiny is fixed. Satan can't take that from you. No one can take that from you. Everyone's clear on the concept of an individual destiny. Watch it get much more complex. People can have entangled destinies, right, where your destiny is tied to somebody else, okay? Let's make this exponentially more complicated. So now we've got these two people's destinies that are fixed together, right? They both have to land at the same place at the same time. If you were to imagine this happening for two people at the same time, do you think it's more complex? Drastically. Do you think the enemy tries to use the complexity of that to delay them at all costs? Absolutely. So then you can have basically two people accidentally doing this brown line where God's just having to constantly clean up after them, or you have one person trying to walk the perfect will, and then you have someone else kind of permissible often. When you have your destinies tied together, you choosing to go off the path or being in denial about going off the path, it will delay the other person because your wagon is hitched to their wagon. So there's more responsibility there when you have a joint destiny. Is everyone picking up what I'm putting down? It's more complex. And the reality is that sometimes, imagine that we have these kind of like collecting points, and maybe you can think of a few times like this in your life where maybe there's this group of people that all met in what seems like a happenstance way, and because they all met, many people's destinies were changed. Example might be creating booty literally changed the lives of millions of people. So if that one thing hadn't have happened, millions of people wouldn't have all collected into that one moment in time. So there are these collecting points where many people's destiny collapse into this one choice point, and then many of our destinies are tied together, right? So we have the ability to pull and delay each other in pursuit of our collective destiny. So with this in mind today, I want to dive a bit deeper into how different characters throughout the Bible walked out their destiny so that you can do some reflection and see which character you are most like today so that you can pray for God to bring some transformation. Because God has very clear destinies for each one of us, and it's time for us to stop delaying or just completely doing us instead of all what God wants us to do. The time is now. We are going to be reading a bunch from the Bible today too, so I won't be offended if you grab your phone if you don't have a Bible. I opted not to put in a ton of Bible verses today. I'm going to actually read from my Bible. So we're going to start at Hebrews 11 if you do have a Bible. This one's going to be a bit of a long one, but this specific book in Hebrews actually details essentially a list of how each person that is a main character in the Old Testament walked out their destiny. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see, right? We've got all these things happening in the invisible realm where we don't see them, but we know that they're going to happen. We just have to keep on the path. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, right? Our destiny, boom, was already formed before we even got here. So that what is seen was not made out of what was visible, right? We can see this interplay between the physical and tangible world, visible world, and the invisible. By faith, Abel brought God a better offering than Cain did. By faith, he was commended as righteous. When God spoke well of his offerings, and by faith, Abel still speaks even though he is dead. By faith, Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. But before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. And without faith, it is impossible to please God because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. By faith, Noah, when warned about the things not yet seen, in holy fear built an ark to save his family, right? He was told what was to happen, and he was actually to act in obedience and make a physical object that everyone likely thought he was crazy for, because he was getting information from the invisible realm, and he trusted God and kept moving toward his destiny by faith. By faith, Abraham, when called to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. And by faith, even Sarah, who was way past I've added the way in, who was way past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. And so from this one man, as he is good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as countless as the sand in the seashore. All these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things they promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they left, they would have had an opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had embraced the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son. And even though God had said to him, "It is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned," Abraham reasoned with God that even he could raise from the dead. And so in a manner of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from death. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau in regard to their future. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshipped as he leaned on the top of his staff. By faith, Joseph, when his end was near, spoke about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and gave instructions concerning the burial of his bones. By faith, Moses' parents hid him from 3 months after he was born because they saw he was no ordinary child. They were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of the Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as a greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith, he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. By faith, he kept the Passover in the application of blood, so the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. By faith, the people passed through the Red Seas on dry land, but when the Egyptians tried to do so, they were drowned. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell after the army had marched around them for 7 days. By faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. And what more shall I say? I do not have time to tell about Gideon, Barak, Samson, Japheth, and David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised, who shut the mouths of lions, quenched the fury of flames, and escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned into strength, and who became powerful in battle and rooted against foreign armies. Women received back their dead, raised to life again. There were others who were tortured, refusing to be released so they may gain an even better resurrection. Some faced jeers, flogging, and even chains and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning. They were sawed in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatkins, destitute, persecuted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains, living in caves and holes in the ground. These were all commended for their faith. Yet none of them received what had been promised, since God planned something better for us, so that only together for us they would be made perfect. Obviously, there are a ton of people that followed out their destinies through hardship in the Old Testament. And this is a complete historical recounting of everyone's pursuit of their destiny. So we understand that each person's destiny was a fixed point, that even though the physical world did not look like it was going to be aligned with that agenda or that possibility, it happened nonetheless. So we have to understand that not only is our destiny designed by God, but it is ordained by God. It is blessed by God, and nothing can stop it, even our own stubbornness. Let's start with Abraham. So if you want to turn to your Bibles, we're going to start at Genesis 12:1. This is where Abraham is actually told that he's got to pick up and start walking. without having any idea where he's going, which we've talked quite a bit about in this church. Many of you would likely want to ask questions. Are there going to be rest stops on the way? What about food? How far exactly are we going? It wouldn't be easy to just simply pick up and start moving. Now, the Lord said to Abraham, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth will be blessed." It's a pretty big destiny. Literally, all who on earth will be blessed because of your action right now. So when we were talking about kind of the joint destinies, imagine getting a destiny spoken over you like that, where every person on the planet's destiny is tied to your obedience. Kind of ups the stakes a little bit, right? Some of you have the perception that you're on your own. Many of you don't realize that although maybe God hasn't directly spoken that your individual destiny is tied to many others, you're forgetting that it's certainly a possibility. Your disobedience and your selfishness may be negatively impacting countless others. Abraham had to make a choice. Leave everything he knows behind to follow God on a journey that he will show him as he's in momentum, because it is literally tied to every person on the planet Earth and their destiny. And did he go? Thank God he did, right? Abraham was a here I am type of character. So one of the things that I want to highlight about Abraham is that Abraham knew that he had to move toward his destiny, but await instruction while moving. So one could argue that at this point in Abraham's journey with his personal character, could Abraham actually handle all of the information? Did God feel like he could give him all of the instruction? No, right? If he's saying just do the following, it's really important, and I'm going to show you as you go along, it shows that Abraham was not yet ready for the detail of the information. What can we sometimes do if we have too much information? Self-sabotage, be stubborn, weaponize it against ourselves. Imagine for a moment if Jesus wasn't Jesus, and knowing everything that he knew about what he was going to have to do, he was like, oh, that sounds pretty brutal. I think I'm going to go hit the bar instead, right? Thank God Jesus is Jesus, and he knew everything that was going to happen to him, and he did it anyways. Some characters in the Bible are not well developed enough at the time God has to speak something to them for them to not use the knowledge against themselves. So sometimes it's I need you moving. I'm not going to give you all the deets, but let's go. Hop. Abraham at this point was certainly that character. Let's take a look at Sarah. Sarah was told her promise that she would have not only a child, but birth many nations. And at the time, she was an old woman and had not ever had a child. She was told her promise and had to hold faith in something that seemed hopeless to the laws of the natural world. At that time, people were essentially not able to have kids at 90, as you can imagine. And I believe at the time that this was spoken over to her, she was about 90 years old. So we're going to go to Genesis 17:6. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make you into nations, and kings shall come from you. I will establish my covenant between me and everlasting covenant to be God to you and to your offspring after you. I will give to you and to your offspring after you the land of your sojournings in the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. I just want you to imagine a place where you feel like you're the lowest in your life, where all the laws of the physical world are like, you can't possibly have kids, you're too old, like, throw it away. And then you get prophesied over that you will essentially birth kings and many nations. If you put yourself into that character right now, would you fall victim to what you think the natural world is telling you is reasonable, or would you still be faithful in what God told you? It's hard when there are real, seemingly physical facts stacked against you. But I don't have enough money, but I'm too old. I don't have, right? We're trying to measure with physical, tangible evidence to back up why faith is unreasonable. If Sarah had done that, she wouldn't have become the character that she would become. She wouldn't have birthed many nations. So Sarah actually had, in many ways, the opposite experience of Abraham. Abraham said, go, and I'm going to show you. Opposite, God actually told Sarah exactly what she was going to do, but she couldn't know the time or what the next step was. It was just faith. Abraham was given an action step and to stay in momentum, and Sarah was just told her destiny and to hold faith. Sometimes that's the harder one, where you have to hear what you believe doesn't match the laws of the physical world, and also don't do anything, just keep faith. It's harder to do nothing. Let's talk about Peter. We're going to go to Matthew 16, so let's move forward quite a bit. Matthew's character is an interesting one because when he first comes into the scene in Jesus' life, his character's not at all well-formed yet. Jesus gives him a name, and this name signifies not only what he will become for the foundation of the church, but who he will become. Sometimes the name changes or the names given signify where you have a gap or flaw in your character that needs to be refined by God. Peter is one of these characters. What prevents him or delays him from his destiny is a chiseling of his character. He still has to develop. Who he fundamentally is not matching his destiny. He has to alter things in himself, grow through adversity to be worthy of receiving his inheritance. Peter was given a name that sealed his destiny, right? You are the rock, and on this rock I will build my church. It's a pretty big destiny. Do you think at the time he felt deserving of it? No, he probably was like, sure, buddy. Yeah, you are the Son of God, so I'm going to default to you on this one. But it probably felt uncomfortable. That's a big destiny to have spoken over you when you still have questions about yourself and your character internally. And even though his character still had shaping to get him to who he would become, Jesus kept speaking life into him. Sometimes God will keep speaking life into you, and instead of receiving it, you double down on stubbornness and you keep pushing it away. So what you're doing here is God's trying to align you with his perfect will, and God's trying to give you the opportunity to refine and grow and build, and some of you are choosing the poop brown path. We always have three options. Do it our way, do it the permissible way where it's not God's first choice, maybe not even God's fifth choice, but there is always a perfect will that God is trying to walk out in our lives. And for some of us, it's a process of refining character, just like it was for Peter. So we're going to go to Matthew 16, 17 through 20. And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah." And Jesus answered, "The blood has revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." Then he strictly charged the disciples to not tell anyone that he was the Christ. What happens with Peter later on in the story? Does he have a little oopsie at some point? Is there a moment when Jesus tells him what he's going to have to do, and what happens? Does somebody say something that... Deny him 3 times, right? And then there are other moments when essentially someone's own heart and desire to protect Jesus ends up getting them called essentially Satan as well, right? So we have these different people in the Bible who their own character flaw ends up essentially allowing the enemy to jump in there and speak out, even if it sounds like it's out of a positive emotion, to actually try to prevent Jesus from actually following his destiny. So when we're thinking about the disciples, right, the disciples who are, from our rubric of walking with the Lord, they're doing a pretty good job for them to be the 12 that the Son of God himself selects. We need to recognize that if they can be used as a weapon of the enemy to try to delay Jesus' destiny? Do you think that we're all pretty much open feeding ground too if we're not very clear on our discernment and who we're allowing to speak into us and through us? It's very important. So if we're looking at the Peter character, this is someone whose destiny has been spoken over them, but their internal conflict is what's preventing them from landing in that place. They have character building to do, and they have self-reflection to do to get to that time and place. Then we move just slightly forward in the story to Jesus. Jesus is the only character that actually was given all of the details. Why? Why could Jesus have all of the details when the others couldn't? Because he's God in the flesh, right? He's able to be tempted by Satan himself for 40 days and 40 nights and come out of the desert. Would most of us be able to handle that? God in the flesh is the only perfect living example that could actually handle having all of the information and still doing it anyways. Each one of these characters has a different piece of the puzzle, but because God knows them, he knows what information they can use to propel them, but not give them the information that they're going to use stubbornly against themselves. Right? God has no desire or intention to harm you. He only wants to prosper you. So he's only going to give you the information that you won't weaponize against yourself. Jesus, on the other hand, knew the entire play-by-play detail of his destiny and had to courageously walk it out knowing every single thing that is to come. There is one moment when Jesus almost has a, oy vey, this is going to be really hard, which, I'm actually grateful that there's the one moment where you can actually, as you're reading the story and almost living it vicariously through the words, you can see that there's a moment that's like, oh, but do I really have to? It makes me just feel a little bit better that even God himself in the flesh, knowing everything, walking it out courageously, has at least one moment of like, whew, we're sure this is the only way. Okay, then it's done. So let's go to Matthew 16:21 through 23. Now when they drew near to Jerusalem and came to Bethphage, the Mount of Olives, then Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, go into the village in front of you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied to a colt. Did I just go to the wrong one? No, I am in the right one. This Bible is the illuminated Bible, and it's filled with beautiful pictures that are relatively hard to read. Okay. 1920. That's still not right. Oh, here we go. From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, on the 3rd day be raised. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, far be it from you, Lord, this shall never happen to you. This is what I was trying to tell you before. This shall never happen to you. But he turned and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but of the things of man. So in this moment, right, we've got these 2 characters' destinies coming face to face. The lack of refining in Peter's character and not quite being there yet literally made him temporarily become a mouthpiece for Satan. And for him, it felt like it was coming from this genuine place of, no, I will never let that happen to you. Jesus has his eyes fixed on the destiny, which knows your emotions can't get in the way of what I am here to do. So get back behind me, Satan. So now we have 2 people's destinies coinciding. Do Peter and Jesus have a joint destiny? Are their destinies tied together in some way? Arguably, Jesus' destiny is tied to all of our destiny. But in a smaller sense, a more micro-level sense, certainly Jesus' destiny is tied to the disciples. Jesus is the only one that could handle all the information without letting it get weaponized. I want to take this pause to show you what's happening here with Peter and Jesus. Is Peter's emotional state is getting weaponized against both of their joint destiny. Do you think your emotional state ever does that? Do your emotions ever become the impetus for you to start to create discord, delay, disobedience? right? The disciples are no different. If it can happen to Peter, it can happen to any of us. We have to be aware that the number one territory that the enemy will try to attack us is our mind and our emotional state. If we can't be at peace and at center in our emotional state, it's the easiest way for us to not just delay ourselves, but everybody else's destiny who's hitched to our wagon. Let's talk about prayer points, because I think this week is going to be an intensified prayer point session, because I do believe that what God keeps showing me is there's a refining process that we need to each be going through, because obviously, even in like a very small sense, us all being a part of Chainbreaker, do we think that there are ways that our destinies all intersect with each other, right? Maybe it's not forever, but certainly each of our destinies is in some way commingled. And we have to be mindful and intentional with how we're creating those relationships, how we're connecting with each other, and how we're refining our character to not let ourselves be used as a weapon against somebody else whose destiny is tied to ours. So I want you to screenshot this. I would really love for each person here to really focus on these prayer points this week. And I'm even going to actually assign you with this first part right now. So this first question I want you to think about, and I want you to actually answer it out loud. So what would God say about you, your faith, and your obedience? If you're honest with yourself, is that what you want? So if you really just take a moment, close your eyes. If you're really honest, let's say you had to look yourself right in the spiritually reflective mirror, what would God say about your faith right now? When you get there, raise your hand. Shannon, do you want to share? Solid. Tiff? Steadfast. Jess?
3 steps forward, 1 step back.
3 steps forward, 1 step back. I like the honesty. Anybody else? Angel?
I feel like I've been tested so many times in such challenging ways that I'm pretty good.
Okay.
But my humanness is sometimes shattered.
I've thought about this question a lot in my life, and I think the following most frequently describes my faith, is that I hear accurately, quickly, and I have faith, but I often delay myself due to my desire to placate and care for others, right? So I often am the one telling God, wait, or not now, or it's not convenient because I have all these other things to do. And I would love to not be that person. Anybody else? Sarai, what would God say about your faith? You're not sure? Do you think you have good faith? Is it strong? Yeah? Okay. Next one, which character faith archetype is most similar to you at this moment? What lessons can you learn from their experience? So if you think about your life matched against each one, are you an Abraham? Are you a Peter? Are you a Sarah? Which is kind of just like, here's your destiny, just have faith, but don't do anything, just be. Obviously, there's other characters. Are you a Noah? Are you being asked to build something that looks crazy to everybody else, and you just have to faithfully build this thing? I mean, I can certainly relate to a Noah sort of vibe in my life, right? Where you're so far ahead of your time in certain regards that people hate you and think you're crazy. It's a super fun journey. So think about what archetype here matches you. And you can reflect back on your walk with God. Does God say, keep moving and trust me? Does God actually give you the destination? God actually gives me the destination because he knows that I'm almost like my stubbornness can be used to help me, because once he tells me something is going to get done, it's going to get done. I jump on board with my destiny. But sometimes I can't be told how it's going to happen, because that's where I would derail myself. If I had to know exactly all the ins and outs or how long, then I might lose sight of it. So does God tell you the destination? Does God just give you a name that helps show you where you have to build character? Or is God giving you all the information? I believe God wants to cultivate a relationship with us where we can be more like Jesus, and he can trust us with all the details and know that we're going to walk it out anyways, right? Have our mind fixed on the things of heaven, not the things of this world. Where are you currently lacking faith, or, that shouldn't say patience? Faith and patience have a really inextricably connected relationship, because faith isn't something where it's like you have to have faith for a short period of time and then it just immediately pops off. Sometimes you've got to be in the mud and in the thick of it for a really prolonged period without having any idea when it's going to change, right? Think about the Exodus from Egypt, 40 years in the desert with a bunch of Jews being like, oy vey, are we there yet? It's a long time. Are you the person that's going to be faithful and patient, or are you going to be complaining and looking for ways to get out of it, distract, or escape? Can God trust you with your destiny right now, or do you still have refining to do? And of course, in some ways, we all have refining to do, but I think God is asking us more specifically, where does that refinement need to take place? Is it in your mind? Is it in your character? Is it in your choices? Is it in your impulsivity? Is it in your work ethic? For each person, that refinement's going to be slightly different. So I do want you to pray on this week. I think God is in the building, refining, stretching process, and because our collective destinies are all in some ways hitched together, I think we should all do the work at the same time. I think if we all do the work at the same time, we'll all experience payoff tenfold. So I want to close with prayer, and also after we're done praying, just have a little bit of chit chat about the upcoming Bible study so that we can kind of round table it and decide the when, the how, the why, and all of that. I have some ideas, but I want to make sure that it's a joint decision for the Bible study. So let's close it off with some prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for today. Thank you for this message. Thank you that you create our destiny before we're even into our mother's womb. Thank you that you protect us and that you give us grace and mercy as we inevitably fall short, as we inevitably turn our backs on you, get confused, distracted, cause delay for ourselves and others. Thank you for being a good Father that is always trying to come clean up after us and pick things up. God, I ask that today you show each of us where we have refining to do. God, I ask that you highlight any moments where we chose our permissible will for your life rather than stepped boldly into the perfect will that you called into our lives. God, I ask that you help us see the mistakes, the miscalculations, the emotions, the opportunities for the enemy to get into us and use us as a mouthpiece, just like Peter was used as a mouthpiece against your son. God, I thank you for bringing us all together. I thank you for the opportunities for all of our destinies to intertwine so that we can build something big in this world, God, in your name. God, I ask that you bring healing to every person watching online and here in this building, that you help restore relationships, family bonds, friendships, bring all over restoration to any sort of discontent or discord that's happening in the world right now. God, I ask that you keep our eyes fixed on you and you just pull away and fade out any distractions. God, I ask that you help us all fine-tune our ear to the frequency of your voice and just let everything else fall away. God, I ask that you help us all have a special appointment with you this week where we know you, we feel your presence, we hear your voice, and we can establish with our feet firmly on the ground your perfect will in our lives and nothing else, God. Thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for everything that you are. Thank you for this appointment today, God. We love you. Amen. Okay, so Bible study. We are going to stream it online as well, but obviously we're also going to do it in person. I know that we've got kids and families and all the things. So is there a certain time, does everyone want to do like an evening or a daytime? Does anyone have because I'd like it to just be everybody, not like separate the men and the women. It's 2024, right? Right, all together. Evening, it kind of feels like evening's the only time to really pull this off. So I think we might be able to work something in the evening. What time in the evening is the ideal evening time? Like later evening or like earlier evening? Earlier for you? Like 5:30 or like a 6? And don't worry, it's not going to be every week or anything. Let's not get crazy. I want to slow and steady wins the race here. I'd like to have high attendance in a more limited capacity. So we really dig deep and stay committed, right? Rather than having kind of like a sporadic showing up here and there. So let's say we're going to shoot for 5:30. Does Wednesday work for people? I feel like Wednesday is typically a good Bible study day. Yeah? So my suggestion is, why don't we start with a 2-hour Bible study, but do it once a month and try to keep it consistent for 4 months? Can everyone commit to once a month for 4 months? Because I would like us to pull a thread that's very specific that involves us really rolling up sleeves and digging in. But I think if we have a committed group once a month for 4 months and we just dig in for 2 hours, I think we can really get somewhere. Yeah? Great. So we will pull those details together and let you know exactly when we're going to start, but we'll make sure that we have some snacky goodness here. But everyone bring Bibles, prepare to dig, quantum deep into biblical paradigms and really go there. I don't want it to be some sort of empty thing where we kind of like read from the Bible, chit chat, and then we just leave. I'd rather us feeling like we all went through a portal together and came out like, whoa, that was crazy. I can't believe that was 2 hours, right? That's how I would like to leave Bible study. So let's do that. I think that's everything. No, that's not everything. Who knows what quantum entanglement is? Of course you're okay. I'll put a pin in that one. Just remind me next time when we start church, we're going to start talking about quantum entanglement, because quantum entanglement has everything to do with our destiny. So until next time, I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Woo, woo, woo.